Yeah, remember the name. Jazz Takhar, best in the game. Mamba mentality in his own lane. So better pay attention to what he be saying. Get the message, ain't no question. Giving advice for any investment. Welcome to the broadcast, the Jazz Takhar podcast.
So the team tells me we're ready to rock. Myuren, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome, buddy.
Thanks
I'm
for
awesome.
having me on.
Like, it's weird. Before 3 days ago, we've never met in person, and now I've seen you twice in 2 days and 3 days. So it's kind of cool,
Yeah.
man. Thank God and God bless social media for all the negative that people speak about when it comes to social media. Like, you know, like this is what all this negative stuff's coming on my algorithm on Facebook and on Instagram and on TikTok.
Right.
Here's the good side too. And I really want people to kind of understand where I'm going with this and why I'm mentioning it, because you and I would never be sitting on this couch if we weren't somewhat connected on Instagram. Because I've seen some of your stuff come up. You've always commented, or you're liking stuff. We kind of run in some similar circles because we're both investors and in the real estate world, and we're in the GTA. But if, you know, at the start, if it was just social media, then I'm not sure if we would have been actually sitting here together until I actually heard you speak.
Yes,
And I was just telling the crew here, it's actually a live audience. Big shout out to all my immersioners. If you're a real estate agent, check out what the immersion program is, because I really, truly think myself, Alto, and the rest of the crew are bringing a lot of value to the industry. And so we actually have a live audience. But to the guys and girls that are taking their dog for a walk or they're on a drive right now, you obviously can't see Myuren. And I've been telling people, download the app, get the app. It's free in the App Store, in the Play Store. Just search my name. You can see the video. You can see the handsome people that come on my couch. But Myuren, what I want to talk about is really your journey as an investor, what you're seeing out there in terms of opportunities. From what I know, and so I'm going to be learning as well, which is really one of the reasons I started this podcast, is from a selfish perspective, which is let me learn from what people are doing well, what mistakes they're making, but then let other people who are watching and listening come along for the journey. And that's what I want with you. But again, how you been?
I'm doing well. It's crazy. When I started following you on social media, I just knew you from content, right? Like peak pandemic. And once I was just on a date with my girlfriend in the parking lot, and I told my girlfriend, like, yo, like, that's Jazz. And then you actually waved back. We never had met, but, you know, you were pretty welcoming on that. And I think in the past 3 months, we ran into each other twice at similar circles. But it's just crazy to see how I thought I would never be in a room with you, and just destiny made it work, just us kind of focusing on our own thing.
Am I better looking in person? I'll fucking hit you. Okay. I saw a post of yours. I think it was yesterday. You joined, you know, Darren Voros's, which is kind of cool too, because by the time this episode comes out, it's like 2 episodes ago, I actually had Darren Voros on the couch.
Yes, that's
right. And so it was kind of cool. I saw this post, and I love reading things like this, man. It's so positive. It's so inspiring. That's what social media can offer you. You'll always get what you're looking for. So if you're looking for the negative, that's why you get negative videos and content on social media. When you're looking for the positive, you're going to get the positive. You wrote this post that was talking about that you signed up for Darren Voros's course as a student 3 years ago, and now you're speaking at his course.
So I signed up at a Keyspire event.
Got it.
Darren World was part of it. And it was February 2020, so just before the pandemic hit. And a couple of months ago, I just bought my first investment property, but the banks wouldn't let me refinance. They said that, you know, I needed to increase my income. So my boss at work, I would do work at a commercial real estate company. He was like, why don't you just check out Keyspire? So I just signed up for it, walked in, had no idea what it was. And Darren was just speaking about all the projects he had going on in downtown Toronto. And I'm like, this is sick. Like, I thought developers or like major, you know, institutional companies are the only ones that are able to do it. But the fact that anyone can do it with the right mindset, I thought that was the best part of the workshop. And for me, I just envisioned myself being on a stage and being able to inspire the next generation of investors coming in. And naturally, Darren thought it would be best for me to be a guest on his workshop that he had for his students. But I came on as a commercial appraiser, as a guest, kind of showing individual the the valuation side of multifamily investments.
So is the multifam kind of what you focus on for your own specific portfolio?
Yes, so I do
Okay.
strictly multifamily, like duplexes and up. I don't have any condominiums or any single family homes.
Okay. And so duplexes and up, and is there a cap kind of like in terms of if there's 25 units, you kind of cap there? Or like where,
So right
what do
now
you
I have
focus
11
on?
units.
Okay, cool.
The most number of doors in a property.
You have 11 units.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of people who are actually watching on the app right now are saying, holy fuck, this guy is pretty young.
So 11 units in a property. So my total portfolio.
No,
is
your total doors is like, what do you got now?
Yeah, 40, around 40.
So in that sense, you're probably like people who are watching right now are like, this guy's young.
right.
You know what I mean? And so that's what I really wanted to also speak about, which was the fact, like, when did you actually get started with investing into real estate? And then let's take people along that journey. Because what you said about mindset, I actually think it doesn't matter what it comes to, like investing into real estate. If you're a real estate agent, which is kind of my target, who's watching and listening, are probably 50% real estate agents, 50% people who want to create wealth and get out of that rat race, right? Either way, I think it's like, it used to be, people used to say like 75, 80%. Fuck, man, I think it's like 90% is mindset.
Yeah.
Right? Because the other 10%, the tactical stuff, the logistical stuff, someone else has done it and they've left the clues, which I think you probably are just picking up on a lot of the clues, hence why we run in the same circles, like with the Darren Voroses of the world and probably the Austin Yays. I know you guys are somewhat connected. You're probably connected to Alfonso as well, some way, somehow.
I met him once. But
Alfonso's
a lot
an
of his students,
awesome guy. I've had him on the podcast like 3-4 times. This guy's so crazy. When you said multifam, that's his jam, right? That 10% can always be picked up on, right? It's that 90% of saying, you know what? Like, why not me? Like, why can't I be the top real estate agent in the GTA? Why can't I have 477 doors? Right? Where I think where most people stop is like, you have to be a certain ilk. Like, you have to dress a certain way. You have to look a certain way. You need to speak a certain way. You have to have certain a specific group of people that you need to hang with to actually have success. So, you know where it starts, man? Like the 6 inches between the ears.
Agreed.
It's like right here. Once you start to believe, now all those opportunities, and cut me off, and I'll probably cut you off 20 times on this podcast. It's once, like, all those opportunities were always around you. It's just that front part of the brain, that reticular activator system, never got actually activated. Right? To actually look for it. Hence why pregnant women see pregnant women.
Yes.
Like, Sarhala, she's in the live audience when, like, you were pregnant not too long ago, right? God bless, and everything went well. Did you start to see pregnant women more often? All the time. But you probably weren't seeing them before, and people are like, oh my God, there's no pregnant women. What are you, fucking crazy? There's pregnant women all over the place, right? It's just that you start to look for it. Is that what started? Like, start with me back then, brother. Like, what was the defining moment for you when you said, you know what, why not me?
So I graduated university. I went to Ryerson, now called Toronto Metropolitan University. Honestly, I don't even know why they named it that, but called TMU right now. So I did that. I graduated in 2018. So I actually started working at Bell because I did want to get into commercial real estate, but I didn't have any experience. I only had experience in banking. So I really wanted to improve my sales. So I was like, let me go into a retail corporate. And I got into Bell. And it was minimum wage back then was $10.50 an hour, because this was in 2017, just before I was graduating. And I wish I did sales like through high school. Like that 6 months that I did just speaking with people, trying to sell not what I want them to have, but what they need. It was one of the biggest things that I've learned, and I still use those techniques or strategies when I deal with actual sellers of real estate. And eventually I started working at a commercial real estate brokerage called Cushman and Wakefield. And I was on Global Occupier Services. So I started meeting a lot of people within the company.
And when you're talking about just being in sales, and you said like certain tactics and strategies, which are important, but I have a funny feeling the biggest benefit you probably got that you're probably using now, and if I'm wrong, let me know, is the comfortableness in just dealing with people.
Agreed.
I think, my father was a taxi driver his whole life. My mother was a factory worker her whole life. Grade 4 education for my mom's, grade 8 education for my pops. Like savvy in terms of businessness, like out of 10, -5.
Yeah.
Like just didn't grow up with it. Like, God bless my mom. She's a really good, like she's the human calculator because she just figured out math on her own. But my father, like none of it. But you know what my father did at the age of like 6? Like when I was 6 years old, when I would want McDonald's, for example, because he didn't really know English well, and people can tell, like I like my fair share of McDonald's sometimes. He made me go ask for it.
Right.
He was like, I don't know what the fuck you want. Like, I don't know how to speak at the counter. Like, you figure that out. As a 6-year-old, it could be a little daunting too.
Right.
But I got used to it. I got comfortable speaking to people. I got comfortable asking. And so at 7, 8, when when the teachers said, who wants to help with the book sale or who wants to help with selling Christmas ornaments door to door, I was like the first kid. And then at 12, getting the newspaper. Like, all those things were kind of the building blocks, right? So when you said retail, like if you have a younger person in your life, like 10, 12, 14, I have a 9 and 7-year-old, like I put those kids to work when it comes to asking for questions. If we're staying at a hotel, like we were in Mexico not too long ago and the kids wanted room service, they're like, Daddy, we want this. I'm like, go order it. Figure it out. Yeah. And I just tell them, I'm like, the person's probably going to say no. When they say no, you have to figure out how to get what you want. And it generally starts by asking, like, I'm sure like when you're knocking on doors, when it comes to trying to maybe get a seller to do a seller take back mortgage, they might say no the first time. You probably are starting using some of those strategies and tactics.
Yes. Half my portfolio was when a seller financed a portion of the purchase price, and a normal individual that has no exposure to that, they would probably think that's a scam and I thought the same thing too. Like, why would a seller would want to finance a portion of a purchase price, but you need to find that incentive? And I think it really comes back just to the fundamentals. For me, I kind of put myself in that situation, but growing up, or if I were to look at my future generation, I would put them in situations similar to yours in terms of how to figure things out, how to ask the right question. And if you don't get the right question, then you need to be able to diverge the conversation to a point where you can get to that conversation that you want.
And I'm sure like just even dealing with rejection, right? Like people saying no, and sometimes that just means not yet. And or understanding like, okay, this is not just the right person. I got to keep going. Like I got to like maybe the first door, the 8th door, the 42nd door, they're still saying no, but it's, if you stop, you're not going to get to that 43rd person who would have possibly said yes, which could have been the fucking deal that you created in real estate. Because I strongly believe that the best deals in real estate are not found, they're created. And you're a monster at that, and I really want to dive into that. But you would never have gotten to that unless you kept on asking, right?
Agreed.
So let's take people back now, because I go off on 57 tangents, brother. When was that moment, that defining moment to you when you said, okay, you know what, I'm going to start investing now?
So it was a point where I felt like I was missing out, fear of missing out, basically.
By looking at who though? Like, where did that come from?
Just social media, real estate prices. And I just wanted to own something in the greater Toronto area. So it was more of...
How old were you at that time, by the way?
I was 24.
Okay, continue.
And in February of 2019, a lot of the developments in condominiums were being focused on the Vaughan metropolitan area because the TTC just got expanded. So we had oh my God, I don't even remember the name, but there were so many going on in that area. So I just offered on pre-construction.
I did a lot of those though. So probably Transit City, it could have been.
Transit Cities, and the Menkes had one. Mobilio.
Menkes has a festival.
Yes.
Okay.
There was Mobilio condos.
Mobilio, that's the other one.
That was just north of 407. So that's the one that I did.
Okay.
2 bedroom.
So you invested into a pre-con.
I did, but I backed out during that cooling period.
Got it. Continue. Okay, sorry. Go.
So I did it because I thought I really wanted the top corner unit, 2 bedroom, 2 bath. I could have got a 1 bedroom or a bachelor because that's what I could have afforded. But I got my emotions involved into that first purchase. Like I wanted to, because more of a pride, like you're 24, by the time it's done, 27, 28, probably be married. And during that 10-day cooling period, I had to come up with 120,000 over the course of the 2 years.
Yep.
And I did the math. I'm like, yeah, I can save $2,000 a month. Like, I just won't go out. I won't travel. I would just do everything for 4 years. And my dad was like, knowing you, I promise you, that's not going to be something that you would be able to commit to.
24, that's tough. But continue, yeah.
And, my sister, my mom, we kind of all talked about it. And I did back out during the cooling period. So my next decision was I'm going to go buy a car.
Okay.
I was like,
So
screw
from
this.
an asset to a liability. I get it. Cool.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just gonna go buy a 2-door car because all my friends are driving cars.
Yeah.
Let me just do that. So I actually went to buy a car, a private sale. I met up with the seller, and I had a line of credit that I had, and I'm gonna use that to buy that car, and I'm just gonna pay it off. Screw life. Let me just enjoy my life, live in the moment, and I'll figure it out when that time comes. And my dad was like, so my dad actually went to see the car owner because he didn't want me buying it. So he made an appointment himself. And I didn't know that at the moment. It was only a couple of weeks later. He was like, yeah, I met with the seller and I wanted to see the car if it was something that you should get. And Myron, like, this, you're not buying a car. Like, why don't we come up with a strategy for you to buy your first property? And I was like, because my parents just bought a new house then. My sister just got married a couple of years ago, and my brother just bought his first investment property in St. Catharines. So, but that was just more of a buy and hold, no strategy, no nothing. And I only had $10,000 saved up. So I told my parents that, why don't you guys lend me money for closing as gift funds, and I will pay you guys back with a line of credit. So the budget that I had was only $50,000 because they only had $40,000 that they can lend me at $10,000. So on a 20% down, that's about $250,000 to $260,000, which I was qualified for. I took a map of Ontario, and Windsor at that time was a city that had all the economic foundation in terms of growth, like population, university, and in terms of employment. So I went there. All these properties listed, I went $199,000. I'm like, this is sick. Like, this is so cheap, $200,000. But little did I know, once you go there, it's just a price where people overbid and it sold for more than $300,000.
What year was this now? So 28?
October 2019.
2019. So we're still in the height. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of multiple offers are going on. I mean, it's listed at 199, but let me guess, they're probably selling for fucking 285, 300.
Yeah, and more than 300.
Okay. Continue.
And for me, little did I know about real estate, but all I knew was I do not want to overpay.
Okay.
I don't want to be dragged into this bidding war. So I started targeting properties that were listed at asking price. So if they were listed at $299, the seller wants $299. And I filtered that, and I went to a property listed on the market for $299, single family home, 3-bedroom, 1 washroom with a basement, right next to the hospital. Like, I can literally walk to it for $299. And it was on the market for 2 months, but people just assumed that it would be sold for more than $300,000. And I negotiated with my dad, brown mentality, like
Hey, bro, we filter. Negotiate over fucking apples back home, and I love that shit.
You just put a random amount. So
100.
I felt like we weren't going to
get. What did you put? I'm curious. I was like, so $299. Do you kind of
like at $290?
Oh, that's not bad. Okay.
My dad was like, we'll go at $225. I'm
like, oh yeah, your dad was like, got it.
And I'm like, I'm not going to be embarrassed, but. My dad was like, you know what? Let's go in with that.
He's old school mentality. Old school. Yeah.
So he went at $250.
Yeah.
And we went back and forth, and we came in at $257,500. The seller was from Vancouver, and we got it 20% down, 3-week closing. So my parents gave me $40,000. I put the 10, bought it, and I used my line of credit to pay my parents off.
Okay.
So now I had a line of credit, but the value of the property was $300,000. So, but I didn't get qualified for that. So I didn't have the right network in terms of mortgage agents, but I had to find a tenant. Now, I know you put on, this was with Darren Burrows, you said that how you like to put slightly lower than the market rent because you want to get the best tenant.
Well, I want to cherry pick the best tenant possible. Yeah.
Me being a 24-year-old, I was trying to get the maximum rent that I could get. So the market rent was $1,800. I was trying to get $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
And that first tenant did not pay rent. They were selling drugs out of the house. Then COVID hit 3-4 months later. Could not drive to Windsor. And now I was paying for the property. The mortgage was only $800. I was living at home at that time, so it was manageable. I can't imagine if it was a GTA investment. But I did learn a lot through that due diligence period. I knew that, okay, like I didn't ask for a lot of the things I should have asked. And then I started looking in terms of what the process was to get a tenant out. And I would not have learned that had I not been in that situation.
I want to go back for a sec because there's a lot to unpack.
Right.
And then we'll go to the next property. So you said that you didn't know to ask for certain things. What didn't you know to ask? Because there's a lot of people who are going into their first properties right now. Damn, I know people who are going into their 10th property and I still like the shit
Right.
that they tell me that they don't ask for. I think they're still doing it wrong. So what were a couple of those things that you like, shit, holy man, like looking back, I can't believe I didn't ask, the tenant for this, and that.
So number one, don't get your emotions involved in terms of listening to the tenant's story. So sometimes the tenant can guilt trip you to make them feel sorry for them. And then you feel like, my parents taught me, well, like, you should always help other people. But then I didn't know not to run my business like a social service. Like it's literally a business. You're not, yes, you want to help people.
It's not a nonprofit.
Yes.
Get it.
But you need to make sure they do pay their end of the bargain. In terms of employment letter, the phone number that the person gave me in terms of the previous landlord was the wrong number. So me being in commercial real estate, I should have pulled the title on the property that they were living at and being able to see who the owner was and match it, or at least reach out to the listing agent that I was using for the actual transaction of the sale.
And really quickly, just to give value to people who might not be a real estate agent, don't have access to like you did in terms of checking land registry. If you just call your local real estate agent, maybe somebody in your network that is an agent can quickly find out if Joe Blow is the actual owner of that property.
Right.
And so the reason you'd want to do that, because I know you kind of glossed over it, Myuren, is that if you're renting out a property and the tenant says, look, I used to rent out 123 Main Street, call my boy Nikki, and then you have your real estate agent check title, and then you realize that it's fucking owned by, Yas, we got a problem. And if they're just starting this relationship off with a lie already of that magnitude, that they might be thinking about selling some drugs or doing some things out of it, right?
Right. And those are small stuff that I learned in terms of asking the right questions, or even looking at the tenant demographic. Like she said she had a son or a husband, but she never bought them. So you want to meet the entire family too, because you want to make sure that their story is aligned with what they're telling.
So true.
Right.
That's a nice tip, man. Like, you don't really think about that because, like if you bring the whole family together and then the stories don't align, boom, another red flag.
Yes.
Like what I always say is, and I think I added to the video that I posted with Darren Voros, I said that, or maybe it was a comment. That's what it was. When, as an investor, or a landlord, when you're renting out a property, and tell me what your thoughts are, because now you have a lot of experience with this, Myuren, is that you could probably only get to like 90% of effectiveness going through the checklist of what you need. That last 10%,
Right.
unfortunately, is the gut feeling. Like, you know what, there's just something about this guy, Brandon, that, man, I'm not going to really jive with. Or, there's just something about this guy that I really, really like. Like, okay, Brandon checks off on all these things, and I kind of like him. You're still going to leave a 10% chance that he could fuck you. Does that make sense? Like, do you feel like I just don't, I've never come across anyone or any type of checklist that is going to guarantee that the tenant's not going to screw you.
For sure.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Now so you got this property, you closed on it, you had some problems. Did you get this tenant out, and how was that process?
So I went through the N4, where once the tenant misses a payment of rent. So the first mistake is when the tenant did not pay rent, I reached out, but I did not serve that N4 because I was listening to their stories, and they were saying, hey, just give me 2 weeks, they'll pay it. But then the story doesn't align. Like, there was a lot of delays. And then I reached out to a paralegal, and this was when the peak pandemic, when everyone thought the world was going to be ending. Everything was by phone. Like, you couldn't even leave your house, and you couldn't even visit your investment properties because the rule by the provincial government is you can't enter another property, right? So luckily what I did was, thanks to my dad, he called the city to see if there's any government program for, at that time during the pandemic, they were offering a lot of incentives for people that could not afford their rent due to loss of job. And we reached out, and then we saw her name on file. So what happened was the lease agreement that I provided with, she signed, she forged another lease agreement under her name, gave it to the city, and she was collecting subsidies from the government to her name. So when I called the city and I found out, hey, well, my name is already in the system, I'm like, no, I've never applied for this. And they sent me the document. Then we started getting the story online. And then I told them there's 2 ways we can go about this. I either take you to the court for fraud, and you're going to be dealing with way more money than what you're doing, what you and I have to deal with because you're dealing with the government, or you just leave the place and we call it even. don't owe me anything. We'll move on from this.
Now, with that much fuckery on your first investment property, what made you still continue to want to do this?
For me, it was more of, I saw a lot of potential in the business because I see a lot of success story. And anything you do in life, there's always a risk. You want to buy a car, you can take it on the road. There's a chance of you getting hit by a car, right? You going just for a walk on the street, anything can happen in life. So for me, I was 25 at that time, I just thought, what is the worst could happen to me? Like, it's just me, myself. I don't have like any kids. Like, I don't have a wife. And I was like, you know what? Let me use that experience and find a better tenant. So I found a great tenant for $1,800 plus utilities. She worked at the hospital. I did all the due diligence I needed. And that tenant was paying 2 weeks in advance before rent was due.
Okay.
So at that point, I totally forgot that property even existed. But during that entire time, even though I was dealing with the loss of rental income with the tenant not paying rent, I actually enrolled myself into real estate education modules online where I was learning about how to scale a real estate portfolio. Because during that time, I was still trying to refinance that property. All the banks were closed, so everything was virtual. And I was going through that phase, like how to refinance, how to pull my capital out. So how to get an investor focused real estate mortgage agent, because I was just going to the branch and they only know so much. And I was able to refinance that property for $300,000. And that's peak pandemic. So all the comps were April and May, right?
So hang on. So that property you bought at 300.
257.
I apologize. You ended up getting that for, so call it 260 for argument's sake. And then now new value is what?
300,000.
300,000. So then how much did you actually pull out of that then?
36,000.
36,000. And so that's funny, right? Because sometimes I usually tell my investors, I'm like, like if it's under 75, 80, 90 kind of grand, just let it sit in the house still. And then we'll refinance when it kind of goes north of 100, because then there's a little bit more that you can do with it.
Sure.
But this is why I tell people, like, what I speak about for my own portfolio and how I advise my clients, that doesn't make it gospel. Like it's more of a conservative approach. But I'm really curious now to find out from you, what did you start to think about what you're going to do with that 36,000 now?
So for me, it was just to pay that line of credit that
Got
I
it.
used. So that was because being at that time, my salary was around the $50,000 because I was commission based. So that's my first year into the new role that I had. So banks were only taking my base salary of $50K. So I wasn't able to buy another property unless I had no debt, right? And going back to when I bought that first property, like in October 2019, once I bought it, I had to replace the furnace. The furnace shut down, so I had to put $10,000. And when I bought it, the banks made me cancel one of my credit cards. I had two. Not sure why. Like knowing what I know now, like that's not necessary. But they made me cancel it, so I only had one. So I used the credit card to pay for the entire furnace and AC, and I had $0 in my checking account. So there was one point I couldn't even buy a coffee. Like my boss was like, "Hey, Myron, can you go grab me a coffee?" And I'm like, I swear to God, I can't get you a coffee.
Hey man, I just drank 5. I'm not really in the mood for a coffee.
You know what I mean?
You trying to get out of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was at a point where, like you kind of bled all your money out for closing costs and everything. So I had to wait for my next paycheck to be able to pay that line of credit. So when a lot of people tell me, saying that, hey, they're dealing with a lot of trouble financially, I'm like, hey, like it really comes down to mindset. Like I was at the bottom low at one point, and it took me 6 months to get there. And I guess luckily the pandemic reduced my day-to-day expenses in terms of going downtown for transit, going out with food, meeting friends. So during that time, like I tried my best not to use my credit card. That same summer, I sold my car. I had a 2011 Nissan Sentra that my parents gave me, and I sold it for $3,000. And that $3,000 was what I was going to use as a closing cost for my next property, because it was actually cheaper renting that time than owning a car, because nobody was renting a car. So I was able to rent a car for $40 or $50 for a day to drive to like different cities to find my next property.
Okay, so then how do you start to expand your portfolio? So what was the next property? Because now I want to get into like actually how you got into the 40 plus doors now that we have.
I learned the BRRRR method. So buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat the cycle. And I started learning about OPM and creative financing. So the one thing that I wanted to do was not have any joint venture partners. So I was like, I'm going to try this for the first time. If I can't do it myself, I'm going to start raising capital. and there was an off-market duplex in Windsor. So that same agent, the listing agent, once I bought there, I gave him a lot of referrals, maybe 10 or 10 clients. And I wasn't expecting anything in return. Like when people ask me, hey, like who did you buy in Windsor? I'm like, hey, like there's a guy named Carmelo Gorchepa, and he was getting, and I was giving a lot of business. But when the time came for me to find an opportunity in Windsor, and I told him what my criteria was, he gave me an off-market opportunity, and he could have listed it, but he found something that met my criteria. So it was an off-market duplex. There was tenants selling drugs, any problem, anything that you can deal with. There was people living in there that shouldn't even be living
and
there.
And that fit your criteria, right? So,
Yeah.
because I want to get kind of in the headspace of you, because people are thinking like, okay, you didn't really have a huge down payment saved up. Like, what was your criteria? So you're looking for like, give me the house that's beat up. Like, I don't give a shit what the situation is. Is that kind of what the criteria? Okay.
So it was 2 duplexes, but the other one, they wanted to keep it. So I bought that duplex after negotiation for $140,000. And this was in November of 2020. So $140,000, and the market value as is, like if I were to put that property on the market, it would have been $250,000.
So explain the spread. Like, how are you able to get it for 150 and but the actual value being 250?
So the seller, the point of the transaction was me to inherit the tenants.
Okay.
So the owner did not want to deal with the tenants that were selling drugs. It was becoming a hoarder house. Like I was like walking over needles. There was like a music band in the basement, copper wires all over the ground. So for me, I was like, you know what, this is what I could afford, and this is what I could take on. And I didn't have the 20% down to 28,000. So that was another issue. But I was like, I'll figure it out.
Right.
So I had it under contract for 140. So I sat down on my dining table and I was like, hey, I don't have 28,000, but I got to be able to figure this out. So there's a difference between purchase price and market value, right? And on the market, based on what I understood, it would have sold for 250,000. So I could easily buy this and refinance, and the bank will give me 80% loan to value, which is 200,000. So that means the purchase price is $60,000 lower than 80% loan to value, which is a pretty low risk investment from a numbers standpoint. So I was like, let me try buying this in cash, right? So during that summer, every family event, every colleague meetup that we had over virtual, and I think during that summer, they started opening some restrictions, and I just told people, hey, I'm looking to raise capital.
Now, when you had it under contract really quickly, how long did you have it under contract for?
For 2 months. I got it under contract in August 2020, August 29th, August 2020.
And so just so I kind of can follow along as well, when you say you had it under contract, is that conditional on anything?
Cash offer.
Okay, I apologize. So it's under, when you say under contract, it's cash offer and you have a closing. So it's firm. It's a firm deal. And closing's coming up in what, 3 months?
3 months.
Okay, got it. So you're 2 months into this. Now you go into raising capital mode.
Yes.
Okay, continue.
So this was October of 2020, 1 month before closing. And I just reached out to my network, explained the deal, and I kind of told them how the money would be paid back. And I found someone that was willing to lend $150,000 on a promissory note. So I bought the property in cash, and that covered my closing cost and the cash for keys to get the tenants out. So prior to closing, I met with the tenants, came up with a negotiation in terms of how to get them out. So on the day, a couple of days after closing, I bought it in cash, met with the tenants, and it was just myself. I stayed over in Windsor, rented a car, went to Windsor, stayed at a hotel. And I literally, like, they were doing drugs and stuff, and I was literally like watching them get their stuff out. And I spent the entire night just like helping them move out.
How much in terms of cash for keys, is that like a 2 month payment, 3 month payment? Is there a rule of thumb that's kind of out there that you're
Right.
aware of? Like, what did you have to do in that situation specifically?
Typically, it's like the first and last month's rent of where they're moving towards next, but I'm sure nobody's going to be taking them, right? Like for them, they're just probably going to go to another hoarder house. So for them, it was just 5,000. And for me, I'm like 5,000 for peace of mind. I'll give that to you. And now I had a vacant duplex. So what I did now was I needed 100,000 for renovations. Now, when I bought this, the other thing I looked at, what would the value be once I fully repaired it? And that was about 350,000. So I went to a buddy of mine who had a line of credit. I'm like, I'll be willing to pay you 10%. The 150, forgot to mention, I'm paying 10% interest only payment on that. 50,000, 10% interest only.
That's on the promissory note.
Yeah.
Somebody's giving you 150. You got to pay 10%. And is that due over like a year,
On a
2
monthly
years?
basis.
On a monthly
On
basis?
a 1 year term.
Okay, on a 1 year term. So you got to pay back the $15,000 over a year's term.
Right.
So you gotten some really favorable terms here
Yeah.
as well. And then the renovation money, what was the interest that you need to pay on that?
So the $50,000, it was actually 12%.
Okay.
Interest only payment. And then I had the $40,000 line of credit that I got back from the refinance, and I had another $10,000 line of credit. So all in $250,000. So I have $250,000 in debt, right? That's my second property that I have. And
But none of your own money.
yes, none of my
Right?
own money.
Like when you said OPM, other people's money earlier, I didn't want people to screw that up with like OPP or anything like that, right? Like that's literally, you're in this investment. Yeah, you got some debt, but in my opinion, that's the difference between good debt and bad debt, right?
Right.
Like that is good debt because you know that you're going to be able to do the renovations, you're going to be able to increase the rents, the values are going to increase, and we'll talk about the numbers in a second, but it's having that mindset to say, okay, you know what? Like I'm going to be able to pay all this back, but it's not bad debt like credit card debt, unsecured lines of credit. That is what falls in the bad debt. I won't go down the path of if school is good debt or bad debt. I'll leave that for a different podcast, but I'll let anybody who wants to comment on that
Right.
go crazy. But you have a lot of good debt here, right? In terms of it's not your money, and I think that's the best case scenario. It's just a matter of now getting all the renos and stuff done.
Agreed.
How are you building your team? Like at this point, you're kind of new in this, right? Like, how are you finding the renovators and the plumbers and the electricians? Are you getting like one GC? How are you going about
I
that?
booked about 10 contractors. They walked through. I didn't even know what $1 per square foot on a vinyl flooring was. I didn't know how much paint costed, but I had a lot of contractors going in. And finally, I figured one that made sense. So I had two contractors, one that I really wanted, but he was not available. So then he was willing to do one unit. And I had another contractor who did the main floor. And I stayed over multiple times, like just trying to figure out, watch them. Like I had to replace the furnace. I'm like, hey, what kind of furnace are we supposed to put in? And it was just asking the right questions. You don't really know if you're slightly overpaying, but all I knew is I had a budget, right? As long as I'm within that $100,000 budget, I'm totally fine.
And you came up with the $100,000 budget how? Like, is that
Oh.
based on what you wanted to sell the property? Yeah,
Based
like,
on the average invoices I was getting for the scope of work.
got it.
And like I had to waterproof. So that costed like $12,000 right there. Furnace, $12,000 right there. So I was in it $25,000-$30,000 before I even actually renovated the property cosmetically. So long story short, once that was done, it took about 5 months, 4 to 5 months. That's when I went to the bank and I was like, I want to refinance. And that time, like COVID just hit, but the market just started going up. And the property was appraised for $390,000, $389,000.
And you were probably basically, I think you said 350 is what you were kind
So
of
during
basing
the
it.
stabilization period and the
Yep.
renovation period,
Yep.
it went up $40,000.
So at 390 now, did you get 80% loan to value on that
So my
property?
new mortgage was $311,000.
Perfect. And so how much did you actually take out in your pocket?
So with interest and all my holding costs, the $250,000 plus $10,000, just under $10,000 in terms of expenses, that paid $260,000. So all my line of credit, the $150,000, and the buddy that I raised money with. So I made $50,000 in additional capital without using any of my own money.
And so now you take that 50. Now did you use that right away for another property? You didn't go buy that car yet, did you?
No.
Okay, go.
So this November of 2020, and during this time, actually I met my content creator, Javon. He shot my duplex.
Shout out to Javon.
And he actually came to the property to shoot my video. And he was like, what the hell? Like, how the hell do you buy those like with no money, none of your own money? So I was actually explaining the numbers. And he actually started building his own real estate portfolio in Windsor too. But that's a whole nother level, whole nother story. But November of 2020, I bought that duplex. In December, I bought another duplex in Sudbury because during this time, Windsor was getting way too expensive. So I took another map of Ontario, and the only city left that has not been touched was Sudbury, because Sudbury is, I live in Vaughan, so it's a 3.5 hour drive to Sudbury, 3.5 hour drive to Windsor, and Barrie, which is a major metropolitan city, it's just another 2 hour drive north. So a lot of people invest in Sudbury from Barrie too. So I was like, you know what, let me go there. So I found a 6-month closing for an off-market duplex with a wholesale deal for $260,000. So I did the math. I'm like, I should be able to refinance the property and have about $50,000 that came out. And I didn't really gamble, like numbers don't lie, but me being a rookie investor, I was willing to do that. And that value at that time, based on my numbers, was around the 380 to 400 once fully renovated. So bought this, refinanced this in May of 2020, bought that duplex in June of 2020, put the $50,000 down. 3 months later, that was appraised for $400,000. Now, February 2020, I actually sold my single family home off market for $380,000. I bought it for $257,000.
Okay.
So I was trying to figure out the flow of money, and it was capped because the rental income and the mortgage on the single family home, it was getting too tight. So it was preventing me from the scale that I wanted to grow. So when I got a private offer for 380, I was willing to do it. And at April of 2020, I was buying things as if I had a lot of money, but I was being able to figure out how to roll the cash. Sold that April 2020. I bought a triplex at the same time. So in June,
Sudbury as well.
Okay. I bought an off-market duplex and I bought an off-market triplex for 380. The triplex was appraised for $575,000 with only $60,000 in renovation. So I got all my capital out, and the duplex was appraised for $400,000. So I got my renovation money and my down payment out too. And during that summer, I bought a fiveplex and a duplex as well with a vendor take back mortgage.
Massive congratulations. Now, people who are watching and listening, they're like, holy fuck, that moved really quickly. Like, it starts to snowball, obviously. What is it that people need to look for to find these off-market deals? And is it only through off-market deals? Could it still be done through traditional routes, i.e. with a real estate agent through like MLS? Or is it this burst strategy is really only going to work through off-market deals?
So I bought 4 properties on the MLS,
Okay.
but I think at that time, everyone was just overpaying for real estate just during that era of the pandemic. Now, I think it's a great time. There's so many opportunities on the MLS, depending on where you're looking at. But in the moment, it was strictly relationships. So in Sudbury, since I was growing a lot and staying there many days, building my own team of contractors, the conversation I had with them was, if you find me an off-market opportunity, I'll be willing to pay you a referral fee of $1,000 to $5,000, depending on the deal, if I close. So I was providing people with incentives, and I've yet to provide anyone incentives. A lot of the times, I just was able to deal directly with a seller or a wholesaler. But it was just letting people know that this is what you do, right? That I'm a real estate investor, and regardless of what the issue is with that property, if the price is right, I'll be willing to deal with it.
Now, what is the situation that you're looking for when it comes to an off-market deal? Is it somebody that's possibly having trouble paying for the property? Is it somebody maybe on the other side where like they want to sell, but they don't need the money right now, and that's where like a vendor take back can kind of get involved? What is it that you're telling people even that you're looking for? Because I know right now, Myuren, and the reason I asked that question, brother, is because like I know the answers to this personally. It's more for the people that are watching and listening. Like they're like, bro, like I got 50 G's, I got 30 G's maybe. And I want to invest into real estate. I don't want to do the stuff like a pre-con. I don't want to just a single family. I kind of want to do what Myuren's doing here, right? Like, and I'd really want them to get inspired, not only because they like the 2 Indian guys talking their thing right now, but it's more like that we actually inspire them to take action, right? And so I want you to take us down that path of like, this is the properties that you need to look for, and this is how you actually find them.
So I kind of work my way backwards. Number one, I look for distressed properties.
Okay.
Or properties that tenants are not paying rent. And sometimes there's sellers that just don't want to be listing on the market. They don't want to deal with people walking through the unit, bothering the tenants. So
and how would you even know it's distressed or the tenants are not paying? Is that through like people telling you that?
Conversation with the seller or maybe with the wholesaler. And I kind of do that my numbers backwards. So what I do is I take the value of the property as fully renovated. So since I've been investing in a market, I kind of have an idea in terms of where that value should be. And I take 80% of that value because that would be my new mortgage at the time of refinance. So if the market value fully renovated is $1 million, automatically the first number in my head is 800,000. That's my benchmark. So then I look at a property, and let's say it's a 4-unit building in Sudbury, and it requires 100,000 in renovation. I take $100,000 off of the 800,000, so 700,000. And depending on the scope of work and dealing with it, I might take another $10,000, $20,000, $25,000 just to make sure I have my holding costs and everything covered. And my maximum offer on that property would be $675,000.
Okay.
Because I'll buy for $675,000, I'll put $100,000 into it, and with some contingency, but my new mortgage will be $800,000 once that value is $1 million. So I'm getting all my capital out. But the other thing is very important is all about cash flow. So in these secondary tertiary markets, the reason why I was able to qualify for so many mortgages is because I started understanding how the banks were underwriting mortgages. So I went to CIBC, I went to TD, I went to RBC. I'm like, don't tell me how to qualify for a mortgage. Give me the formula, right? Like so for CIBC, I don't know if they've changed it, but it's the annual rental income. They take 80% of it minus the annual property taxes, and they divide it by your annual mortgage payment at the stress test. So during the pandemic, the stress test was 5.25. I wish it was back then. I thought 5.25 was way too much, but now 5.25 is a really good deal.
Yeah.
Right. Depending on what bank it is.
For sure.
So, and I started buying properties where it met that formula, the debt servicing at 1.1. And as long as that debt servicing was 1.1 or higher, and I met the assets that I had in terms of cash, then I could qualify for that mortgage with just using the rental income.
Now, at the time of this recording, we're in spring of 2023. Where are some of those areas? Like I don't see Windsor necessarily being anywhere near where it was back in 2019. Not to say, your strategies might not work there now. Where are you kind of like, you know what? These one or two areas is where people can maybe find some stuff.
I think Northern Ontario probably right now.
Like, would you go as far as like Thunder Bay
Timmins.
and shit? Timmins?
In driving, I wouldn't go to Timmins because for me, I want to be within a 4-hour radius. Even
Yeah.
though, do I want to be investing in Sudbury? Absolutely not.
Got it.
Right? But I didn't have a choice. Like it was just a time that I was in a position to be able to buy real estate. So I went to Sudbury. But for those of you looking to get started, there's North Bay, Sudbury, still a great market. There's Cornwall, Hawkesbury. But a lot of these cities, like for me, the way I look at Sudbury is nobody moved to Sudbury because they, for a random reason, they're moving to Sudbury for a job. If you're looking at London and St. Thomas or Welland and St. Catherine, those are secondary markets to a primary market. But Sudbury doesn't have a secondary market. It's the primary market based on where demographics go.
What kind of jobs are over there? Like in Sudbury?
Mining is number one.
Got it.
The CRA head office. And there's a lot.
Yeah, I see that address on the fucking brown envelopes all the time.
And then you got the University Laurentian. There's a few colleges, but there's a lot of private sectors that are up there in terms of banking. Because after Sudbury, there's Thunder Bay, but Thunder Bay is another 8-hour drive. So it literally is like the transit hub for Sault Ste. Marie as well. So to go to the U.S., the only way you can go from north is through Sudbury. So North Bay, everyone has to drive through North Bay, through Sudbury, go west all the way down to Sault Ste. Marie. So for me, I just felt like out of all the opportunities that I had in terms of what I could afford, Sudbury was probably the best option.
Now, in your portfolio, like right now, is it still like you're actively, would you say 50% or less? Is it looking for burrs, or now are you, because you're kind of going more into the multiplex, like 8, 10, 11 doors per property, wanting to do a little bit more buying and holding there, or what's your thought process around that?
Yeah, so I'm still doing the burr. There's two ways that I can look at it is buy and refinance. So don't do the renovations, because a lot of properties that are just being sold just at a discounted price where you can just buy, do very light cosmetic stuff and just like quickly refinance. But I've only sold 2 properties till this date. The single family home, and I bought a vacant 5-plex last 2 summers ago. Vacant 5-plex off market again, due to relationships, fully vacant, turnkey. I just had to do the roof and exterior. October of 2021, I closed on it with the vendor take back. So the seller put in 11%, I put in 14%, and a credit union for 75%. Now the value 2 months later, it got appraised for $715,000. March of 2022, once I saw that first rate hike go in, for me, it's not about the number of units, more of the quality of the units and the quality of the building. So for me, all brick, great layout, will attract great tenants. So that building, I bought it strictly for the cheap purchase price, but it was causing me the most headaches just based on the location. I sold it for $790,000 privately, because for me at that time, I felt cash was probably the best thing that I could have in addition to all my money tied into real estate. So I cashed out about 300 grand just from that sale. So a lot of people say, hey, like there's no way you could have scaled at like this quick. But for me, it's just selling at the right time when I need to, but also keeping the properties that are getting the right tenants. So since that first property where I did not get any rental income from that tenant, I've yet to had one missed rental payment till this day, knock on wood.
Yeah, no, it's right here, man, for you too, brother. Look, I say to my real estate agents, I say to my real estate investors, real confidence is built from experience. And obviously the mistakes that you made in that first go at it with the tenants, I'm sure the second time around, like you made sure you crossed your T's and dotted your I's, right? But you never would have learned any of that unless you actually took action and invested. Is there anything that you've seen in the last, call it even year, where in the GTA you were able to take advantage, or somebody in your network that you know, a friend of a friend, that was able to actually take on the burst strategy in the GTA, or is the lift just not there?
I think the lift is there in terms of purchase price, but the debt servicing isn't there based on the interest rate. So you can get a great deal now, but on the refinance, depending on what your salary is or what the rental income on the property, you may only get 70% of the new value, because the values haven't, especially on the commercial real estate side. Residential, I think it fluctuates a bit more quick based on transaction, but commercial, the data is very lagged, because there's a longer closing period. So in commercial, obviously there's a cap rate. If you and I were to agree on a deal today and we have a 6-month closing, typically 3 to 6 months, and that data gets posted online, me as a commercial appraiser, I only see the transaction publicized 6 months from now, right? So I'm going to be using the transaction we're having right now as a comp. In residential real estate, it's like the data is
6 minutes.
There you go.
Yeah, right?
It's on the
right away.
So it fluctuates a lot, but for me, I'm seeing a lot of people having trouble refinancing. People who have a negative net worth now because they bought at the peak, they can't sell at what they bought for, and they can't refinance based on a new value. So for me, as people in their 20s, I think, and you've talked a lot about it too, is rent where you own and invest somewhere else where the numbers make sense, if that's what you can qualify for.
Yeah, man, I'm a big believer of that, right? Like I want as many people as possible to take advantage of building equity with that first property. I think it's important you get yourself in the market once. You can then refinance it, or you can sell it, and then at least you got into the market once. But if you're just having a tough time wrapping your head with buying your first property as your principal residence, fuck it, just rent.
Agreed.
As long as you invest the rest of the money.
Yeah.
You know, my concern is, and I'm so glad Pops was in your life to say, Myuren, you're not buying this car, bro. You know, because my concern is, especially with my 35 and South people around me, my Nickies, my Yasses, my Stevens, my Tai-Tais, I'm concerned with them. I don't think as much as I was maybe 2 years ago, because now they edit the videos and the podcast, so they're hearing the same shit over and over again. They're hearing from someone like yourself, where they very, very rarely make decisions of buying dumb shit.
Right.
You know, like they invest in themselves. You know, one thing that, yes, it always excites me. Like he's always, like his, probably in the last 3 years I've known you, or 2.5 years, I think the most excited I've seen him, other than when he edits my videos and sees me on his screen, is when he invested into a camera of his own.
Right.
Right? Like it was like the lens that he bought. What was it? The camera and the lens? Like it was a ridiculous amount, like 8 G's or something like that, right? Like 10,000. Like this guy was like on cloud 9.
Right.
Somebody else might have been like, oh my God, it's 10 grand that he spent. But he invested in himself. That's an investment into himself. Like he didn't go and he doesn't buy expensive stuff. Nikki's the same. Like all my guys are kind of like that, where my concern for the general population at that age is like they do get caught up on the social media and they're like, whoa, like my boys or other people on social media, they got cars now, they got houses. Some of them have jets. They don't know that the jet was maybe rented for the day for the photo shoot, but then they start to make decisions based on that stuff, not long-term wealth creation.
Agreed.
And someone like yourself was able to do that. A couple of things I still want to touch on really quickly with you. Number one, our boy here. Why are you, as a real estate investor, creating content? Why are you putting out content?
So for me, I gotta give big props to like Javon. He's always been telling me past 1 year, like, hey Myron, like we gotta get you starting to shoot some content to share the resources available. But for me is right now I have a great network in Sudbury, but what about the rest of Canada, the rest of Ontario, or maybe even the US? Since I strictly focus on raising a lot of capital to the deal that I want to get into, I need to be able to to build trust within the community in terms of where I've been able to get it, into where I've been able to get myself, but also inspire other people to say that, hey, just because you see something on BlogTO saying you need $200,000 to buy your first property, you really don't, right? There are other ways you can partner. For me, I've done it myself, but it's not for everyone. You can always joint venture with another person. For me, I know a lot of people who didn't have the capital, they focused on education, right? They raised the capital, but there was a 50-50 partnership, but there's so many creative ways to do it. So for me, content is to share different ways to invest in real estate. For me, I got into vendor take-back mortgages. Like nobody thought, even myself, I got rejected probably 20, 50 times when I picked up the phone because every seller that I reached out to, there would have been, no, like, why would I want to give you my money? But I didn't connect with them the right way. And there's a few stories that I'm had with sellers in terms of how I've been able to get a BTB mortgage, even when their first response was no. And I want to be able to share those stories on social media so people, when they are put in positions, they are thinking about different ways that they can negotiate and incentivize a seller.
So because I've been screaming it from the rooftops, like obviously in the real estate world with agents, I have some credibility, you know, I've been doing this for a while and now like I'm telling them why. And it makes a little bit more sense to them, like right off the bat, like, okay, I can understand why you're telling me as a real estate agent, I should produce content. What I've been screaming from the rooftops for the last like literally 8 to 10 months is having investors, real estate investors produce content because of exactly what you said. And now viewers, listeners, you heard it from an actual investor. This guy's not a real estate agent. You're not even licensed as an agent or anything. Good. I just want to make sure. But as an investor, you're going to hit a wall at some point, and you're probably, if you're wanting to scale this, if you want to get a onesie and a twosie kind of deals in your portfolio, you don't need to listen to what I'm saying. But if you want to start to scale it, you're going to hit the wall from a financing perspective, and you're probably going to need to start to raise capital. Sure. When you go raise capital, if you have no credibility, nobody's going to want to give you their money. Right? Now, if you produce content and you documented this story, let me just kind of, ask anyways, because I don't think you're going to, I think you're going to be fine with it. How old are you now?
Today's my birthday, actually. So
Fuck off.
I'm 28.
Holy shit, you didn't let me know. Happy birthday, brother. Holy
Thank you.
Awesome.
I had to think myself, I'm like, all right, I'm not 27
Hey, what
anymore.
better gift than being on the Jazz Takhar podcast on your birthday? But no, I really mean that. Thank you so much. I didn't know that. For you to take time today, that really, really means a lot, man. Happy birthday. At 28, when you do this for another 2-3 years, and 31 is going to maybe seem old to you, like I'm 41, bro, like 31's not that old at all. Not even 41. I have more energy now than I did when I was 31, actually. But you're going to be putting out content for, documenting all this, being on other people's podcasts. Have we got him to start his own podcast yet, Javon?
No. Don't get him started.
Get him on that shit. Okay, after you guys leave, tell him why he needs to do a podcast. You got to do a podcast.
Right.
You have to do it. It's a no-brainer. You don't need all this kind of setup, but you need to do a podcast. But in 2 years from now, you would have been producing content for a total of 3 years or 4 years. Man, you got a lot of collateral that you're going to be able to show all these other people that you're trying to raise money. And is it going to close every single person? No. But you're going to give yourself a higher probability, stacking the cards in your favor to out of the 10 people that you go raise money, 5 of them might be like, bro, I've seen you here. I listen to your podcast. I watch your content. You know what? I actually do want to get in a deal with you. Right. So that is why I'm telling people, and you're watching somebody in it right now, and I can't wait. It's why I love what I get a chance to do, is because all this shit's recorded. And so 3 years from now, we're going to, put up, there'll be a reel that Yas or Nikki will put together, like me with talking about it today in 2023. And in 2026, where like you're blowing up, because I just see that for you, where you're raising a lot of capital because of the content you're creating, right? So, but it starts with the podcast. Like your whole content creation journey will be on like steroids the second you start a podcast, because you'll get all your clips out of the podcast. Yeah. One last thing I want to talk to you about, because we kind of started here. you weren't afraid to go to an investor meetup, even when you weren't that comfortable necessarily talking to people and all that. What has the investor community, specifically here in Southern Ontario, done for you? How has it been a benefit? Because I'm a big believer that the investing community is one of the best communities out there when it comes to groups and like with like for real estate, because for some reason I just find, Myuren, that they don't hold things close to their chest.
Right.
You know, like I go to a lot of agent meetups, entrepreneur meetups, and there's amazing people in that as well. Don't get me wrong, but it's not as sharing of a community sometimes.
Agreed.
Where I just have never really come across any type of real estate investor that doesn't want to share. In fact, they talk too much. And I mean that in a nice way. But what has it done for you specifically?
So for me is having
And
a shoulder.
if nothing, that's okay
No.
too.
For me, it's having a shoulder to lean on, right? There are a lot of investors, like I can't go to mom and dad or my siblings because they just haven't been exposed to it, right? They're only going to know so much. But for me, I was kind of taking one step back. When I bought that first property, my parents, knowing what they did, they gave me an amazing life. They told me to buy that property and hold it for 30 years, and it'll pay down the mortgage. That'll be your retirement money. Simple as that, right? But for me, I had to go outside my network to find people who were doing things that I wanted to do. And I think a lot of people take advice from people who have not lived the lifestyle that you want to live. So for me, if I wanted 10 properties, I need to go meet people who have 10 properties and figure out how they did it. So a lot of them, so I'm going to a real estate meetup tomorrow. I probably go 2 or 3 times a month. And you just meet someone who, let's say they closed on a property and they couldn't get a deal done, but they had a mortgage broker that came in. I'm like, oh, who's your mortgage broker? Right? They'll give me a name. So when I'm in a situation similar to that, I will get that investor's contacts information, see what they did, maybe get their power team, and you're just building a network. And I think it's just the power of the network you can build as you continue to scale. And there's a lot of off-market opportunities that you can also get as well, because not every investor can close a deal. So every week there's an investor that reaches out to me and they're like, hey, Myuren, like I don't have the capital to buy this, but I'm more than happy to share you the information that I have, because I know that I invest in Sudbury and some in Windsor. So for me is just walk into a room, and I've paid, so I'm part of Synergy Mastermind, and
Synergy is Darren's.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. And I paid the fee, which was more than $15,000 to join, and I had nobody in the group, right? But I wanted to be part of that network, and now that entire network is like a family, right? I met Darren and I got to know him better, and the rest of the group, and now we're going to Victoria, BC in June. But it's just a bunch of investors coming together, but a lot of them are doing land development. I know nothing about being a land developer. I can value it, but I haven't been on the other side of it in terms of what the phase is. So you're just having those conversations, because in 5 to 10 years down the road, my goal is to get into development once I build the equity that I have right now. So for me is just don't sit on your laptop. I was doing this peak pandemic. Everything was virtually, right? And everyone's starting right now, especially in the market we're in at this moment in spring of 2023. There are so many opportunities to get into a room and just meet a lot of people. And the other day, I want to buy a loft in downtown Toronto, and I saw you, and I'm like,
I forgot about right?
that.
We talked about that.
And just based on what you posted online, I'm like, who other than Jazz would I want to talk to, right? And I just told you in person, I'm like, hey, connect me with the person that you think would be best for me to talk with.
See, that for everybody who's watching and listening right now, the importance of, if you can get to a place where you can meet with as many people as possible in person and online, I think that's the best hybrid. And so you do it from an online version, you do it with content, because I'm sure a lot of people just DM you now or private message you on LinkedIn or whatever it is, hit you up on Facebook and say, hey, man, I got this deal, yada, yada, yada. And then when you're actually going to these in-person events, that's where you actually get to put the face to the name. And so to everybody, get out. If you want to invest into real estate, get out. There's and the majority of these are free events. Like a lot of them are free meetups. There's mixers, and then there's might be introductory meetups to like an actual mastermind group.
Agreed.
You make the decision afterwards if you want to actually pay the 10, the 15, the 20,000 and all that. I can tell you just out of experience, I don't head a group, so I'd have no vested interest in this. I don't get paid if you join Darren's or Alfonso's or anyone, so I don't really give a shit if which one you join. But I can tell you one thing: the $10,000, $15,000 ticket might be like, whoa, that's a big ticket. It will save you hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Agreed.
Right? And it will, more importantly, have the possibility of growing your net worth by millions of dollars. Because to Myuren's point, the network and the team of experts you can build can really only be built with people that have done it already. Hence, success leaves clues. My brother, I can't believe you came on your birthday. I'm getting goosebumps just even talking about it.
And one thing I want to mention, remember that car I told you about that I wanted to get and I didn't get it? I just bought that same car, but a newer model just last month. And now the real estate paid for that monthly payment, right? So for me in the moment, just for the followers, that just great delayed gratification, right? I just wanted to touch that quick. 'Cause I think our generation really needs that. That if you really want something, had I bought that car, I would not be where I am right now today. But now I get to own that car for free. And I think that's the biggest flex, is when you can own things without using your own money.
100%. I'm not sure what your favorite socials are. So people who are watching and listening, where do you want to send them? Like, are you a TikTok guy, an Instagram guy? What do you like?
Instagram is the best option right now. So Myuren C, MYURENC. Send me a DM. You can book a coaching call, a consult call. And for me, like, I'm more than happy to just jump on a call and just get to know you better.
And we're putting them on the spot. I'm sure there's a podcast coming soon near you on all podcast platforms. I'm sure you'll hear him and catch him. I see Javon giving him the yeah. So that's going to happen soon. My man, happy birthday. Thank you so much for bringing so much value to my viewers, to my listeners, and to me, man. There's a couple of things that I picked up on. I'm like, shit, I could do that better. I could start to talk about that more. And then I just know you and I are going to have a lot more collaboration, because for me, this is the year of collaboration over competition, and we're just going to make it happen,
and
brother.
Thank you for whatever you're doing as well. The outreach you've been able to do in the community, like, kudos to you.
Appreciate that.
Like, when you started on social media with like 200-300 followers, I think I was one of your first followers, and I'm like, damn, like, this guy only has 200 followers, and I just looked the other day, I'm like, 11,000 is crazy, right? But you continue to preach that, just continue to post content, and it inspires guys like me who has like a 10% of what you have right now, but that don't think about what other people think of you. Just share the knowledge and experience you have, and the rest will come itself.
Well, it's a massive love affair between you and I, that's for sure. I appreciate you following me for that long. Look, it's all been me. I don't really have a team that does shit around me, and it's all me doing it. And I know, look at Yas and fucking Nikki, they're like asshole. I get to stand on the shoulders of giants. I have in my life the whole time, like with mentors and just business partners and so on and so forth. But right now I have this team around me, this core group of a Yas, a Nikki, a Steven, a Laura, a Tyler, a Luke, an Alex, a Way, and I might have missed a couple of people, a Chiquita. Like, these guys are fucking amazing. And so it makes my job easier for sure. But I think the most important, Myuren, for me, man, it's made it a lot more fun, and it makes me want to come into work every single day just to see what we can make happen today. So thanks for being part of that journey. It really means a lot, brother.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
my man.
Likewise.
Thank you.